The Atlanta Hawks are the 9th seed currently with a record of 16-16, which is quite a bit worse than what was hoped after this team had traded multiple first-round picks in order to acquire DeJounte Murray this offseason. As a result of this immense mediocrity, Chris Haynes has very recently reported that Trae Young might actually be the next star player to be on the move. And, well, let's just say there's a lot to unpack there, so let's get into it. Real quick, if you end up enjoying this video, then please be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to get more of these videos. I'm going to be changing my content approach pretty radically next year, but we got a couple more videos to close out, frankly, a failed daily upload December. So the first thing that I want to say right out of the gate in regards to this specific Chris Haynes report is that I really just don't think that Trae Young is going to be going anywhere anytime soon. I would chalk this up to being more of a smoke rather than fire situation. Now, smoke is worthy of note and you should definitely talk about it, and smoke almost always leads to fire, but at the very least we're at the starting point and I don't think we're anywhere near the point where there is a fire. That said, this could be a way of looking into the future for the Atlanta Hawks. This could be the stepping off point to it, because you have to question if what they have going on with DeJounte Murray is not going to work, then what exactly does the future of this team look like, because they've committed to it quite a bit. Really, I think what I want to primarily talk about is just simply what's wrong with the Atlanta Hawks. Then we can talk about some trade stuff, because I think this is important background. Now, the first thing I want to do is talk about things that are not Trae Young's fault. The title of this video is going to be something along the lines of the truth about Trae Young. So I'm going to be talking about some issues with him that are a big reason why the Hawks have struggled this year. But first, I want to talk about the non-Trae problems, just for the sake of being fair and balanced, I guess. Shout out to Some More News for the fair and balanced line. I don't think that Nate McMillan is doing a very good job coaching this team. The offense he runs is shockingly stagnant. While there are some factors affecting that outside of Nate's control himself, and I will be talking about those, it's either Nate doesn't have a system with much off-ball movement in it, or Trae and DeJounte and really just everybody on the team doesn't really want to do off-ball stuff and they don't listen to him. Whether it's a locker room disconnect or simply just not having plays, either way, it's a problem. There is reportedly a rift between Trae Young and Nate McMillan, so I could see a world where Nate's calling stuff and Trae's like, that's real interesting, I'm just gonna run another spread pick and roll, I'm not listening to you. So that would not be helping that situation for sure. But regardless of what degree of control Nate has, one way or the other, it's resulting in a stagnant offensive system, and that's a huge problem. A large majority of the Hawks offense is spread pick and roll. Sometimes it's just isolation, but usually that's what they're going for. And then basically everybody else gets ready for a catch and shoot. And I mean that in a stagnant sense. Like, I literally mean the players get ready, spot up in one position for a catch and shoot. They're not running around screens, they're not running baseline, they're not doing back cuts, they're not doing anything to try and create space for these threes. They're simply standing there and then hoping that the ball handler in the pick and roll situation, their defender will leave them and then they'll find them and hit a catch and shoot. There is no movement on the perimeter really at all. The way that the Hawks play basketball damn near feels like they're just doing it freestyle. Like, there aren't set plays, just vibes. And that's not exactly a winning formula if you do not have the talent to adequately be just vibes. That's kind of an issue that I hate with every team when they just have star players and they're like, we don't really have to run an offense, let's just let star players be star players. It annoys me when teams do that, but sometimes that's effective if the team is talented enough. Don't know if that's quite the case with this Hawks roster. The worst thing about the fact that this offense feels so freelance, the fact that it's so cookie cutter and happening over and over again, is that it doesn't have to be a negative thing 100%, but it definitely is for them. For example, the Rockets for years with Harden definitely had a system that was fairly reminiscent that gradually became less and less pick and roll heavy and more ISO heavy. But either way, the idea was just heliocentric, lead ball handler, bunch of shooters kind of just standing there, but it worked. Meanwhile, the Hawks are 19th in offense, and with that system specifically kind of being focused on generating three-pointers, or like layups and dunks. Being that like a huge part of spread pick and roll is actually getting catch and shoots and drive and kick and all that, the fact that they are 26th in 3-point attempts and 3-point percentage shows that it's not really that effective for the players outside of the pick and roll partners. And given that Trae Young has taken such a high volume of the threes that they take themselves, it's not like any of these wings are getting a lot of 3-point attempts. And the ones that are not really hitting their shots. John Collins has been a brick house this year. He is shooting 21% from 3. And guys like DeJounte Murray and DeAndre Hunter shoot a respectable percentage, but nothing special. AJ Griffin has been the one bright spot this year, and he can hit them efficiently. There's really only been one sniper for them this year, and that has been Bogdanovich, but he's only played 9 games thus far. So they're running a system based on generating open looks, and they're not getting them. Instead, it's pretty much just Trae or DeJounte scoring every single time, and when you give them that much of a load, it's going to be a problem. I would blame the simplicity of their offense pretty much single-handedly for the fact that they are in the bottom of the half of the league in offense, when they very well should be top 10. However, on the same token, I do believe there is some blame to be thrown in Trae Young's direction for how this team has functioned. In fact, I would say it's borderline fundamentally his fault. Obviously, he could help the 3-point thing by actually hitting his threes. He is up to 38% from 3 over his last 5 games, so hopefully that's a sign that he's going to be turning his shooting around. However, I think what people are focusing on with Trae Young this season has been fairly incorrect. They're mainly focusing on the fact that he's just not been as efficient with the ball in his hands at times, just not hitting his shots to the extent that he used to. Given that almost all of his shots are off of the dribble, the fact that his efficiency is down means that his creating efficiency has been down. That said, I'm not really worried about that aspect of Trae's game. I think he's going to bounce back just fine, and the recent shooting streak is probably a sign that that's exactly going to be the case. What's really more of a problem, and one that's been more of an issue for the Hawks than given credit for, and one that's going to be hard to mitigate, is his off-ball issues. When Trae is creating in a heliocentric type game plan, there is really little to complain about with him. There are the issues with other players not doing much off ball, but for his part of this equation, Trae Young is doing his job. He's creating shots for himself and others pretty regularly. And if he starts to hit his shots more and his efficiency increases, literally zero complaints. The issue is how Trae stands there when the ball is not in his hands. Now, Trae Young has had his criticisms around his off-ball game before. In fact, I'm almost certain that I've made a video specifically talking about it in the past. However, the difference in the past between the issues with Trae's heliocentrism and off-ball issues and now is that now they have an all-star shot creator in DeJounte Murray, who, if you're going to have the ball in Trae Young's hands all the time, you're not really utilizing properly, and then vice versa. Because of the presence of DeJounte Murray, the offense is essentially those two taking turns as lead ball handlers while the other just stands in the corner. I will credit Murray a little bit more for off-ball ability. He's more capable because his 3 has finally become a legit threat this year, and he's a solid cutter. So that's why I'm primarily looking at Trae with this criticism between the two of them. But they take turns while the other is just relatively not that useful. This is in part for sure the system that does not emphasize off-ball movement implemented by Nate McMillan. And because the other wings are not doing it much, I'm not surprised that Nate McMillan would not be running that much off-ball sets for Trae Young either. But frankly, until this issue is resolved, their offense is pretty much fundamentally broken. There is exactly enough talent on the Atlanta Hawks to manage to keep their heads somewhat above water, at least be a 500 basketball team, while not really having a system in place that benefits them. But that's as far as they are going to go until a system is put in place to elevate that play style. I know it sounds a little simplistic, but it really is just that simple. So if I had to predict, I'm going to assume that Nate McMillan gets fired sometime soon, probably by the time the All-Star break comes around. And hopefully he is replaced, or he just does his job better, one of the two. But if he's going to get fired, which I'm just predicting it happens because that's the way the league is, presuming that does happen, hopefully whoever replaces him is somebody who is going to emphasize off-ball movement. I know that Trae has historically had issues with it at pretty much at every level, so it might be a hard kink to work out, but ultimately it's worth doing, because otherwise maybe he's going to be gone, because I think what we might be learning from Trae Young is that he needs to be the lone ball handler to succeed. And that is a huge limitation, and it's going to make it a lot harder to trade for him. But either way, maybe that's just the world he needs to live in, or maybe he's going to evolve. It's one of those two, but until that aspect of his game is not figured out, I really do think the Hawks' future is quite limited, and it's going to be, I guess you can get rid of DeJounte Murray and then continue to do what you've been doing, but that's also shown to have a little bit of a ceiling on it. But at the same time, it's not like the roster has been perfectly built around the idea of Trae alone. But regardless, again, I don't think Trae is going anywhere anytime soon, and I don't think the Hawks are going to be, I think they're going to be doing better sometime soon. I don't call it a hunch, I don't know. I think they can do better for sure. And whether that's from a coaching change or just Nate McMillan figuring it out, either way, there's definitely a lot of room for growth. This team is talented enough to be a top 4 team in the conference, but they have certainly not been playing like that. Anyways, shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.